if he would unconditionally accept the results of the upcoming 2024 presidential election. I'll read his answer. If everything's honest, I'll gladly accept the results. If it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country. That sounds like elections only count when we win, all over again. And isn't this the problem with him? From the beginning, it hasn't changed. He does not accept election results. Under what world is there going to be this where he says, if everything's honest, oh yeah, I lost. We've never seen it. Please admit we'll never see that. He will never admit an election loss.
Well, first of all, this was said, thanks for having me back, Bill. We've been doing this for decades together. Secondly, Donald Trump was accused of not being able to accept the election results in 2016. Hillary Clinton made a big deal of it, and with the final debate, it's so shocking, it's so un-American. And he did accept those election results. She didn't. She still says...
He won that one.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
I'm going to play more from that interaction in just a second, but that was, of course, from last night's edition of Real Time with Bill Maher, and he brought on former Trump administration official Kellyanne Conway, who's still a Trump loyalist, unlike many people who worked alongside Trump and were horrified by what they saw. But there she gets asked, as you heard, about the phenomenon of Trump asserting and acting accordingly. The only way elections are fair in his mind is if he wins, if the MAGA candidate wins. And he is now saying this again. We heard it in 2016. We heard it in 2020. We saw in 2020 what that led to, both violence and an unprecedented attempt to overthrow our electoral process through schemes that he's now being prosecuted for. And he's doing it again now in 2024, saying that the only way his election against Biden will be fair is if he wins. Now, he won't say that explicitly. Well, almost, but he'll say something like, oh, I'll accept the results if it's fair. And then when you press him on that, he actually has said before that we're so ahead that the only way they could win is if they cheat. And the absurd response from Kellyanne Conway is truly enraging, where she says, oh, he accepted the 2016 election results, which, as Bill Maher said, maybe because he won, that still fits in with what the framework that we're saying is really dangerous, saying that you can only accept results if you win. But also, he didn't accept the 2016 election result. He accepted that he won, but he also claimed that the popular vote was fraudulent and that Hillary Clinton didn't really win the popular vote. And so he claimed it was because a bunch of undocumented immigrants voted, which was a lie. He commissioned an investigation into it. They couldn't find anything. And I don't think to this day he's admitted that he lost the popular vote. So he can't even win in a way with any dignity, which is pretty stunning. And as has been said so many times by me and by many, many others, democracy does not work. It doesn't work when you have one side saying that the only way they'll accept the legitimacy of the democratic result is if they win. That's not how it works. And we'll talk more about that after playing more from that back and forth.
And he'll win in 2024.
Yeah, he accepts the ones he wins.
To win in 2024. But I think his point is important in this way. For some reason, early voting is no longer 6:30 a.m. on November 5th. It goes on for 45 days in some states ahead of time. They count the ballots afterwards. As somebody who has never said election fraud, stolen election, all of that from 2020, I will say that it's important that we have states that count the early votes early and then add together the votes that were cast on Election Day and give us results that night. This shouldn't be difficult in the world's greatest democracy.
Agreed.
And there it is. Now, before I respond to that, and I have another clip to play for you, please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel just by clicking the subscribe button. And you can become a member by clicking the join button to get the daily bonus show if you want more of this. And then drop a comment. Let me know what you're thinking while we're discussing this. Okay, so that response is as dishonest as it gets. And I've said this before, if you want to talk about reforms that you want to make to our election systems, we can talk about that. We can talk about ways to make it more convenient, more secure, whatever. Now, we happen to have really secure elections, so do we need to work on that? But we can always make improvements, okay. But you cannot, and Bill Maher sort of allowed Kellyanne Conway to go there, you cannot allow someone to respond to threats against our democracy by the MAGA movement and lies about our elections by the MAGA movement, and a candidate saying the only way they'll accept the election result is if they win, by saying, well, I just want to make reforms to our elections. That's all I'm saying, in defense of that behavior. Absolutely not. You actually don't care about our elections, about making our democracy more secure, even if that's your concern, if you're advocating on behalf of and apologizing for the greatest threat to our election systems and our democracy and the legitimacy of our elections being Trump and his movement because of the very behavior we're talking about here. And to merge lies about our elections with what could be good faith discussions about how long do we want early voting and how do we make things as secure as possible while as convenient as possible and maximizing for both those variables. But you can't have both those discussions simultaneously, because then you're just using reforms to justify horrific democracy deteriorating lies. And that's completely unacceptable. And so in your life, if someone tries to throw that, well, I just care about election integrity. No, you don't, unless you're willing to first completely reject the nonsense of MAGA. Otherwise, you have no respect whatsoever for the legitimacy of our democracy. And that's being shown by the leader of this movement saying that it's not legitimate unless he wins. And also saying, as Time magazine reports, in an exclusive interview with Time, former President Donald Trump raised the specter of potential political violence if he loses the 2024 election. Quote, I think we're going to win, he says on April 27th when asked about the prospect of political violence tied to November's elections. If we don't win, it depends. It always depends on the fairness of an election. Saying, when asked about the potential of political violence, that it depends on the fairness of the election. Okay, let's just all calibrate our brains. What is he saying? We can critically think, and I'm speaking not to the incredible people in my audience, but instead to those who will turn around and go, it's so hyperbolic whenever I say the thing I'm about to say. He's threatening overtly political violence if he loses. That's what that is. You get asked about political violence if you lose and you say, I don't know, it depends on the fairness of the election. What can we do? That's what you're threatening. And I have to note that is authoritarianism 101. To start by saying elections aren't fair unless you win, and then threatening to weaponize your followers in the case of a loss, and trying to force yourself into power through violent means. That's what Trump is trying to threaten here, and that is really, really dangerous and frightening. And I do have to say, if you're a Republican and you think that you're okay with Trump because of policies that you think he implemented or you want to see him implement, or you just hate Biden's policies, you hate the Inflation Reduction Act lowering prescription drug costs for seniors for some reason, you hate expanding healthcare for veterans in the PACT Act, you hate the Chips and Science Act investing in American manufacturing, you hate investments in roads, bridges, broadband, clean and reliable drinking water, updating airports, etc. If you hate Biden's policies for some reason and you just really want the Trump stuff, you can live in a world where you have the same policy stances you have and also reject a dangerous authoritarian individual who's consuming your party and making it nothing other than a personality cult that is getting closer and closer to being openly authoritarian. That's not what your party has to be, Republicans. And so now's your time to choose. And too many of you are choosing the personality cult that's obviously showing signs of authoritarianism. Again, the threat of violence in the case of an electoral loss. Frightening, frightening stuff. Here is this next moment from Real Time.
So let's say he wins. It's at least a 50-50. Will he relinquish power in 2028?
Yes. 2029, January 20th, 2029, our birthday.
Right. It is inauguration
I'll still be
day.
11 years younger than you on that birthday, but it is our shared birthday.
Okay.
Who's the comedian here?
Okay. But so you said that so definitively.
Of course he'll relinquish power. You know why? Because he will have done such a great job in his second term that whoever the Republican nominee will win, and he'll see it as Trump's third term. That's the way he'll see it.
Well, he had said many times, sometimes in a little comedy bit he does mocking me, because I was always saying he wouldn't lose power. He went around the country for many months and said, maybe I deserve, because we were cheated out of this one, maybe I should get another one, and maybe one after that. So that's just a joke. Ha ha.
Probably, but look,
She says probably Trump's joking about wanting more than a second term, which, by the way, you might notice that I don't bring up the prospect of sort of a third Trump term often, because sometimes I think we should stay focused on what we know. And what we know is bad enough about Trump to never let him close to the White House again. And I think sometimes we lose ground whenever we go further and further with our speculation, where we lose some people who think surely Trump would never want a third term, or would try to break down our institutions to make that possible. And while I absolutely agree with the people who say that's a possibility and Trump could refuse to give up power beyond his second term, I think even getting ourselves into that conversation that is super hypothetical and super speculative is not necessary, given that we have all the information already to make the informed decision of, as hair is just falling on my face and distracting me. We have all the information that we need to know that Trump can't get close to the White House again. And he showed us in his record, his actions trying to end our democracy with blocking the peaceful transfer of power. Again, something he's currently being prosecuted for. That's enough to never let him close to the White House again. And now he's promising in this Time magazine overtly these horrific things for a second term. And he's openly threatening to go after the media, openly threatening to lock up his political opponents, etc. That's enough. We don't even have to think about if he got into office, would he never give up power again? Let's just go based on what we know, which is already he could do irreversible damage to our democracy. And that's why we need to keep him out of power. Now, I do have to say, I really hate, it drives me crazy. And actually, before I finish that point, let me say, there's a huge distinction between just an American out there working, busy, who happens to think, for reasons I think mostly are based on being misinformed about Trump, think that Trump would be better and would somehow do something good. And they think they support Trump. Many of them, the more you talk, it doesn't seem like that's based on, again, an understanding of who Trump really is. But I'm not speaking about that person, even though I disagree with them and think that they're a part of a movement that's really dangerous. I speak about them and think about them very differently than Kellyanne Conway. And so for what I'm about to say, keep that in mind. I think we can have pleasant interactions. As you've seen, I'll go to a Trump rally and disagree and argue, but still be respectful and have pleasant interactions. That's a little bit different than the leaders of this movement who know what they're doing, who are influential and are choosing to mislead people and do this for a living. And so they should have the ability to spend enough time to know that they're delivering wildly distorted information. And so someone like Kellyanne Conway, it drives me crazy seeing the sort of Bill Maher, Kellyanne Conway, hunky-dory vibe where we're all giggling about Trump not giving up power. And Kellyanne Conway is saying, oh, you know, Bill, we're just a couple of buddies, but the guy that I support, he accepts results, but I guess the only example I could bring up is when he won. Oh gosh, we're just having a good time. This is so real and so serious that seeing that sort of interaction does bring down, I think, in people's mind, the urgency of this issue. Oh, I mean, if Kellyanne Conway is able to say this stuff and it's just sort of a laughing matter, it can't be that serious. It's that serious. Democracy on the line, authoritarianism threatening America like we haven't seen before. And that is something we have to take as seriously as we possibly can. And I think treating people, even though I know that I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, I know shows have to be fun, and I know Bill Maher is supposed to be sort of comedy. So I just have a hard time not saying we need to treat the leaders of this movement in a manner and with a tone that reflects how dangerous the views are. So we can still have dialogue. I'm not against that. But make sure that we contextualize that dialogue with just how real and serious this topic is, because it's not a giggly, funny thing. I'll leave it there. Let me know in the comments. I want to hear from you. My goodness. Let me know what you thought of all of that, like I said, in the comments.